Welcome to Just the Who of Us, hosted by Reah. This is a space for honest, thoughtful conversations around mental health, life journeys, holistic wellnesses, and the experiences that shape who we are. Take a breath, settle in, and join Reah and today's guests as we explore the stories that connect us.
Today with us, we have Jason Lange, and today we're going to spend a little time talking about men's mental health. We kind of have this societal expectation of men to think and not feel their emotions, right? Someone said to me earlier, women are expected to show every emotion but anger, and men are only expected to show anger, which is such a profound statement because that really is our societal expectation, right? Like men are expected to, oh, well, he's mad, that's normal, or women are emotional, and but if a woman's angry, then there's something going on. So it's really this kind of weird societal expectation that we have around men and their emotional vulnerability. And so I'm excited to have you here today to shed some light on men's mental health and tell us a little bit about who you are.
My name's Jason, and I'm a men's embodiment coach and group facilitator. But essentially, I'm a life coach for men, and I focus on supporting men in relationships and career and purpose, and health and well-being and vitality. And this kind of mental health component is so big and underlies so much of the stress and challenges so many modern men have. And this idea. Um, has become something I'm really passionate about. That in particular, one of the greatest ways to resource men against some of these challenges is actually just getting connected, right? So I'm sure we'll get into it more, but one of the many messages, men tend to internalize in our culture is to be a man means to be tough and to just figure everything out on your own and not ask for help. And that has some seriously detrimental impacts on men long term in terms of their mental, physical, and emotional health.
Yeah, very much so. And part of what we're going to talk about is in terms of parents, men as parents, but also for men who don't have children, because you
Yeah.
know, part of this is not only the societal expectation, but there's a lot of expectation for men as parents to teach their sons certain roles, their daughters certain roles, or to be one way with their
Hmm.
sons and be one way with their daughters. And I've um, I've had the joy of experiencing a lot on social media, I guess in the past couple of years, of men expressing the necessity of expressing emotion, and particularly when it comes to raising children, because
Yeah.
it's just another one of those generational cycles that we want to break. Outside of our societal standards, we have our household standards, right? And for so long, it was a household standard to be the tough guy. And it brings me great joy to see the amount of men who come on social media and talk about, the things they teach their sons, emotional intelligence, because let's face it, emotional intelligence and really mental health was not a conversation that anyone was having 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even really. I think it's been kind of maybe since COVID that we, like, our mental health became like a actual focus.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it greatly accelerated so many of the challenges we're seeing right now, both for men, right? There was a time during COVID when I was working with guys, and some guys, if they weren't on a Zoom call with me, that was it. They didn't have any other connection in their life. They were living in
Yeah.
an apartment, single or solo. They couldn't go to work. And that highlighted, I think, a lot of the social challenges
Yeah.
men have these days. And obviously, it showed so many kinds of issues for kids, in terms of getting shoved even more onto devices, which totally impacts their well-being and ability to connect. These things were really highlighted in
Yeah.
some pretty substantial ways. And that, yeah, this training that so many of us men unfortunately don't get goes back pretty early. And like you're saying, I think it's one of the actually great endeavors men can take on right now, particularly if they're fathers, but really for anyone they can mentor in their life, is showing that, yeah, it's okay to have emotions and it's okay to express them. And it's in doing that that's how we learn. And so the challenge for so many men was when we weren't taught this, right, from a young age. It's definitely changing, but it's definitely still a thing. Boys and girls are often parented different.
Yeah.
Boy falls down, get up, you're tough, you're fine, get back to it. You can do it, you can do it. Um, Not necessarily slowing down and actually attuning to the pain the kid might actually be in, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that lesson often just gets hammered into boys and men um, repeatedly, that whatever's happening in your body isn't important. Override it, ignore it, be tough, right? Probably the central tenet of the kind of unhealthy masculinity so many boys and men are raised with is to be a man means to be invulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the ideal man is invulnerable. He's tough as nails. He's Superman. He can't be hurt, can't be stopped, doesn't need anyone, never shows any weakness.
Right.
And that just sets us up for a lifetime of pain in a sense. And then in particular, we're just not taught, you know, intuitively to learn what's happening inside of us. And so many boys then, get put into the public school systems, and I mean school systems in general, where to learn, what are we taught? Sit still, pay attention.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, obviously, but the message it actually signals to boys is, hey, that natural impulse in your body to move, ignore that. So what your body wants you to do is wrong. So you shouldn't listen to your body. And if you do, you're a bad kid, you have ADHD, you get disciplined, all that kind of stuff. And, more and more, there's research coming up. There's been a growing gap in educational outcomes for boys and girls. And turns out, particularly in the younger ages, the two things you can do to pretty much erase the gap are, one, hold boys back a year. We actually do mature emotionally slower.
Yeah.
And if you just hold them back a year, they tend to do better in terms of socialization and self-regulation and all kinds of stuff. And then the other thing they found was, if you start the day with like 90 minutes of vigorous physical activity and play, turns out boys have no problem sitting still. They just literally have to get the
Yeah.
energy out of our
That's
systems.
so
But so
interesting.
much of schooling isn't set up for that. You get these like little pockets of 15 minutes of recess. When I was growing up, we still had PE like every day, I think. And my daughter has it
Yeah.
maybe once a week now. It's
Right.
just been like eradicated from school in so many sense. And we wonder why boys are struggling. But the point being, this thing starts really young, where often boys aren't taught what's happening inside them. And when we don't know what's happening inside of us, we don't know what to do with it, and we don't know how to communicate it. And so that starts to create a lot of um, pain, essentially, emotional pain, physical pain, often for boys that they don't know how to talk about.
Right.
And when you don't know how to talk about it, what ends up happening for most boys is then they try to find things outside of themselves to make them feel better, or they act out. And as we get older, we turn to booze, weed, porn, overworking, TV, food, you name it, to try to regulate ourselves, because no one ever taught us, hey, that sensation you're having right now, that's grief. You feel sad. It's okay. Just be with the grief. Or, wow, I got a 1-year-old at home right now, and he's very much in that phase of wants something, and I have to set a limit. It's like, no, you can't grab the scissors. It's not safe, right? And he gets
Right.
really mad. How does one of the great gifts we can give our kids is to teach them what that feeling is. So
Yeah.
he gets, "Ah!" This is the moment where the training really starts of, wow, yeah, you're really mad right now, right? Ugh, you're feeling so mad that daddy said you can't have those scissors. And
Right.
that is actually how kids learn, and boys and girls, frankly, learn to map what's happening in their inner experience to the languaging and the vocabulary. Oh yeah, I am mad. That's right, right? And you can start to see it register in kids. So
Right.
now I know what the sensation is inside of me, and it doesn't feel as overwhelming or scary. Still not pleasant, but now I can start to share things. As kids get a little older, it's not just tantrums. They can say, I'm so mad, I want that, right? And that's actually a huge
Yeah.
leap. And that's just a place where a lot of boys are and men are severely undertrained to be able to name our inner experience.
Yeah, you know, so my youngest is adopted, but he's been with me since about 4 months old, and so he's aware that he is adopted, and he never really got to know his birth mother.
Hmm.
There's kind of circumstances around that, like he knows who she is, um,
Yeah.
but so there's still that major disconnect. And recently, we had a conversation, and he said to me, "I'm just a little angry all the time." And I was like, that's phenomenal. Like to
Yeah.
acknowledge at 10 years old, to acknowledge that, because there's been some behavioral issues, there's been some, different things. And so
Hmm.
I was like, that's amazing. That's phenomenal that you can acknowledge that. And he just like broke down. And then we were able to actually start working on that, to actually say, okay,
Hmm.
well, let's correlate this angry feeling that you feel all the time with these behaviors. And we've actually seen a very big difference. School alone, like
Wow.
behavior has
Yeah.
been a huge night and day change. Now, there's also some Christmas parties that he's wanting to go to, so there's some incentives there. But
Sure.
he even brought to my attention yesterday, I think it was, an incident at school. He was like, that I felt like I could get really mad about this. He said, but I just took that, like they were playing Gaga Ball, which I'd never heard of until this year. He's like, I just took the ball and I threw it and I walked away instead of like getting into
Yeah.
it with this kid. And I was like, that's crazy.
It's great.
Like,
Yeah.
so when we're able to acknowledge those emotions, and then we can start, okay, well, then we had the conversation. Well, there's kind of two parts to this: hurt people, right? And you
Hmm.
have to understand that, for one, hurting everyone else is never going to hurt the person we're actually mad at.
Yeah.
And even in trying to hurt the person we're mad at by hurting other people, that it doesn't change our feeling, right? So now we can take those things and we can move forward in how we navigate
Yeah.
how we're treating other people now that we know why. And so, I just, with my 25-year-old, he went through a very angry period of his life. I didn't do that with him. I was
Hmm.
14 when I had him. I was much younger. I didn't have, I was still a very angry person, you know? So now I have certain conversations with my 25-year-old, but I didn't know that little boys were allowed to express emotion, like
Yeah.
as a teenage mother. And so, it's one of those, like, the more you know, the better you do. But it really also goes to speak to our, like, how society has changed and become more receptive to, oh, men can have feelings too.
Yeah.
And not just the negative ones.
Totally. And it's a loaded term these days, but we've all heard the term the patriarchy. But the thing a lot of people don't talk about is it hurts boys and men just as much as anyone else in terms of
Yeah.
the terminology. A lot of people in this space we now use is this idea of the man box, which is essentially this. Okay, so there's this box of behavior you have to stay within to be considered a man. And if you don't check the list of that box, you're called all the things we can imagine, less than a
Right.
man, the different names, the derogatory terms. And that's what has kept these young boys and men confined, right? To one of which was, like you said, the only emotion you're allowed to feel is anger. Anything else is not manly. It's not manly to feel grief. It's not manly to feel fear.
Right.
It's not manly to feel shame. And we're getting to rewrite the story on that now, right? This is a big part of healthy men's work culture. It's like, no, it's actually the manly thing is to be able to feel those things and not have them take you over or define your behavior and way of being in the world. And this is where, men can be great models for boys of what it shows, where they can show them what it means to healthily express and hold an emotion, right? That
Yeah.
there's a huge difference. Like, as your son is discovering, between healthy anger, which is just energy in our body, and aggression, which is when we take it out on other
Right.
people. And
So
anger
much.
itself is not a problem. It actually
Right.
means we care about something. We don't get angry about things unless we care about them.
That's a
And for a
great
lot of
point.
boys and men, anger is often a secondary emotion because of what we're taught that, oh, I'm not allowed to feel this thing underneath, but I am allowed to feel anger on top of that. And as you discovered, right, you start to create a safe space for the anger. It turns out there was actually a lot of grief underneath for him,
Yes.
right? And a lot of times the anger is coming out because there's fear or grief or uncertainty or something. In,
Yep.
teaching our kids that, yeah, it's okay to be angry. Like, here's some healthy ways to do it. My wife's been doing this with our 6-year-old daughter. They're calling it their anger dojo, where they practice, if you're feeling angry, what's a healthy way to move this, right?
I
You can
love
punch
that.
a pillow, you can cover your mouth and scream, you can shake, you can push into each other in a wall with like to get that energy out. And that teaches that, oh, okay, the energy is not the problem. It's what I do with it. So I just
Yeah.
need some tools to learn to move it and deal with it. And then oftentimes we move a little bit of that energy and the deeper emotion can come or the relaxation can come. And these are real skills that not only boys need, but men need, right? This is a
Right.
lot of the work I do with men is teaching them, hey, actually, instead of burying all this deep down inside, let's work on bringing it forward and allowing it to move through you so you're not wasting all this energy trying not to feel something in your life, which is a huge challenge for so many guys, where they're constantly avoiding certain feelings. And that has a huge cost long term.
Yes. Yeah. And you mentioned grief too. And my husband's mom passed about 7 years ago,
Mm, yeah,
and she lived with us at the time. And I remember he said to me, maybe like a couple years after, that he felt like in the time where she passed, he was expected not to feel, not to experience, not to grieve
yeah,
because, society, first of all, well, you got to go right back to work. When someone passes, you might get the day of the funeral off if you're lucky.
hmm,
Luckily for us, his employer let him take a couple weeks off. Um, you know, he's been there since the beginning of the company, so they should anyway.
yeah, totally.
But
It's a big deal.
but not everybody has that luxury. You might get lucky to go to the funeral, and
Yeah,
so it's just like having a baby for the mother and the father. You're expected to meet more so for the father because you might get a day or two off. Oh, she's out of the hospital.
yeah,
Great, come back to work. And so these intense moments in our lives, we really are expected to just take the minimal time and get back to the things that everyone else needs from you. And I remember
hmm,
that experience with him. He was like, I don't feel like I was really allowed to process and to grieve. And I felt like as a man, I was supposed to just accept it and get over it. And that's not
yep,
within the household. That's within the world, whether it be
totally.
his own family or work or whatever the case may be. And I was like, man, that's not good. Like that's what can we do about that? And luckily there are people that work to change, how society sees things like that, such as yourself. But it was an experience that I was like, that's that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's the kind of central, I think, root to what I see with so many men is to then why we turn to substances, addictions,
Yes.
different things to help
Yeah.
because we're not allowed to feel the thing underneath, so we need to change our state
Yeah.
essentially. And what we're starting to see is that, yeah, that has long-term consequences in terms of just physical tension, men hold in their bodies, autoimmune disorders. These things really start to show
Yeah.
up as we get older. And as we go in and give ourselves the space to metabolize and process this emotional content, it doesn't take a hold of us in the same way. And I think that's the big learning so many men I work with and myself, I've been on that journey my whole life too to, oh, okay, it's actually okay to feel. And as scary as that is sometimes, ultimately it's actually easier long term than walking around with all of this stuff inside And so many men wonder why they're so agitated or depressed or low energy. And oftentimes it's because they're using so much of their life force just to avoid feeling these intense feelings inside
Yeah.
because people, because of the messages they receive that it's not acceptable for them to grieve or process or be in fear or whatever. And so it's just creating space, is the great gift we can do for men right now. And then where I like to support men beyond that is okay, and not only can you do that, but you can do that in community and get support from other men because so many men walk around, right, trying to solve and win at life totally solo and without any community,
Yeah.
which then puts a lot of burden on their families and their partners. Um, but learning that, hey, as men, we can connect with each other around more than just things in sports. We can actually go deeper, talk about what's happening inside. And oftentimes, the very thing we're scared of sharing with other men because of judgment, when we find the right men, is the thing that makes us feel the most connected to them. Like, oh
Yeah.
my God, yeah, I totally have that too. I thought I was the only one. Feels so good to know I'm not the only one. And there's like an actual relaxation I see happen with men over and over and over again, where they realize they don't have to do it all alone or try to figure it out all alone.
Yeah. And I want to also point out too that, because we spent some time talking about children, but, you know, there are plenty of men who are single, widowed, or widowers. No, that's the women. Widowed, right?
Sure. I'm not, yeah, it's one of those two.
But I think women are widows, men are widowers, something like that. But
Yeah.
widowed, widowers, or don't have children, or their children are grown, or whatever the case may be, that experience this loneliness. Um, and it happens in men who are in relationships, very equally. But I think in terms of when we think expressing emotions, we generally think of inside relationships or
Hmm.
for the public, right? So we usually
Yeah.
kind of correlate that with expressing those emotions to someone else. And I know that often, we think of, okay, well, men struggle, married men, men in relationships, men with kids, they struggle with loneliness of not feeling, attached to their partners or whatever the case may be. But it happens very often in single men too. Um, Men who have
Yeah.
lost their spouses, men whose children are grown, and we kind of can lose this connection to our emotions when we don't have that person or people that we were close to share them with anymore, and maybe can
Hmm.
become, okay, well, now where do I put this? Well, I'm just going to keep it inside because, well, who wants to hear
Yeah.
about this? You know. Um,
So true. So many guys I work with, they feel like their inner world. One of the reasons they don't share it is because they don't want to burden other people with it. Oh, I don't want to put this on you or da da da. And so again, they keep it all inside. And one of the great joys I have is I particularly get men into groups and they have this experience where another man finally does step into some kind of courageous sharing and is like, oh my God, this thing's happening in my marriage or this thing's happening with my kid and they bring it forward and they're like, wow, I'm so glad that you shared that with me. I actually feel
yeah,
closer to you. Like it didn't feel like a burden at all. And it's this like moment where I'm like, so you realize when you do that, that's how other people experience what you share. And they're like,
yeah,
what? And they have this realization that, oh, all this stuff I think is going to burden other people isn't. In that, particularly as we get older and into things like men's groups, you know, we're adults. You can trust other people to say, hey, actually, you know what, today I don't have the capacity to hear that or receive that, or I'm feeling
yeah.
saturated. You don't have to manage my experience. Just come
Right.
forward with your feelings. And I'll let you know, like, hey, today actually it's a rough day. I can't hear that, but I'd love to talk to you tomorrow or whatever. And
Yeah.
anyway, it starts to create this whole culture of permission where guys realize, oh, the way I feel towards a man when he shares his vulnerability is how they feel about me. And
Right.
it starts to become the hack to like finally unlock some of this really encoded patterning.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads me to my next question. I want to talk a little bit about the services that you offer, and one of those is men's groups. So tell us kind of briefly about that.
Yeah, I lead. One of the big things I do is I help men create, lead, or just experience what a men's group is and what I mean when I say the power of connection, particularly with other men who we can go under the surface with and really get support when we're feeling challenged or down. Um, and also be held accountable when there's something really important in our life we want to bring forward. And a men's group's really just a place for men to learn to slow down, actually get connected to their bodies, their feelings, and get really clear about what's working, what's not working in life, and what's in the way. And then we get communal support around that. And what it does is it just tends to accelerate men's lives. They get more of what they want. It's a
Right.
simple way I can
Right.
put it. Their relationships get better, they get raises at work, their health goes up, because we all do better when we grow together in community, despite all the programming we get as men. And so a men's group, is a way to just tackle life with a team in a sense, right? And guys, they get so attached to this kind of romantic cowboy, rugged individual stuff. And, I'm like, well, there's a reason, uh, one thing guys love is you talk about Navy SEALs. Like they don't train alone, they train together as a team. Why do they train together
Yeah.
as a team? Because
Yeah.
they're more effective. That's it. It's more effective. So you
Yeah.
need to have a team as a man, right? And that team is going to help you navigate your life more successfully and get clear about where you want to go and what's in the way. And a men's group, I have different versions of that. I have online versions for guys that just want to experience it. I have versions that include retreats so you can actually get together in person. I have trainings on how to start your own group. It's really this big shift that it is one of the greatest investments men can make right now is in other men, and it pays dividends, right? In their intimate relationships, in their families, in their works, in their
Yeah.
work, because we start to get feedback about how we're showing up in life. And a men's group is particularly a great place where men get to experience something that so many men, as they finally actually taste it, are like, oh my God, I didn't even know how bad I was craving that. And that's loving, caring feedback from other
Yeah.
men. So this, the um, teacher and author and therapist Terry Real calls it carefrontation.
Mm.
It's where I'm going to confront you, but with care, not to shame you, not to knock you down, but because I love you and I know you and I see you. I kind of frame this as the spinach in the teeth moment, right? It's like you're going through life and then suddenly, finally, someone's like, "Hey, do you realize you have a huge piece of spinach in your teeth?" And you're like, "Oh, really? I do." Kind of embarrassed. But then it's like, "Wow. But thank you for telling me because all those other people today, no one told me, and I've been walking around like an idiot. I actually
Right.
trust you more now because you showed care for me to reflect something to me that I might not have been aware of. And men thrive with that. Sometimes it's like a little edgy to receive it, but the feeling that, wow, someone is paying attention to me and wants me to succeed. It's like fuel for the fire of men's achievement. And when they get that from a community, it becomes like we become kind of unstoppable in a sense where it's like, wow, I don't have to worry about every single thing because I got, six, 10 other men who have my back.
Yeah.
And when someone's watching my back, guess what? I can actually just pay attention to what's in front of me instead of
Yeah.
having to always be on the lookout for what I'm not seeing or worried about. And so um, I do a lot of work with men, but the thing I'm most passionate about is getting guys into groups and having the experience of what can happen when they get connected to other men.
Yeah. It's, as humans, we need other human connection, right? That's just
Totally.
what it is. And, it's one, if not the thing that we do as coaches to take our experience
Yep.
Think, okay, how can I benefit the world? How can I benefit other people? It's, talking about your own experience, like you said, it can really save someone's life potentially.
Yeah, totally.
Suicide rate among men is high, and having someone who you can understand through their life experience could be life-saving.
It's so true. I think that's the other thing that actually ends up creating a lot of empowerment in guys in groups is the realization that um, bringing forward something vulnerable, talking about my challenges in life, it doesn't just serve me. Because what I see in groups over and over, um, is we call it lighting the way, where it's like one man comes forward with a vulnerability or a truth or shares something hard or feels something hard. And what it does is it actually leads the way and it creates this place that other men can then step into. I see this in groups all the time. I wasn't going to share this, but then da da da, you were so brave in how you shared that. And I realized, like, I got to do this too. And so that gave me the courage to bring forward this thing that I've been struggling with. And then it starts to like go through the group, and men just become more inspired because they see when that man shared, it freed something in me. So maybe if I share, it'll free something in another man. And it
Absolutely.
starts to create this beautiful chain reaction. And very much you never know when sharing your inner world might be the key to saving someone else and helping them realize, wow, I thought I was doomed or that no one else would ever understand this. And you just showed me that I'm not alone. And so if you
Absolutely.
can handle this, maybe I can handle this too.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times in podcasting and having a guest on will talk about something and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, or like it kind of leads to me maybe facing something in my own life, or
Yeah.
the thing that led to the conversation with my son was actually what's called an ICU letter. And had another parenting coach on, and they were talking
Oh,
about,
nice.
yeah, so they mentioned the ICU letter, and I wrote it and I gave it to my son. And when I came back in the room, that's when we had this
Uh-huh.
moment. So, like I didn't know anything about that, but I had this guest on and she mentioned it to me, and it changed the trajectory of our relationship potentially. So,
So great.
yeah, it's sharing your experience with someone. It not only helps you feel understood and related, and it could be anything. But like
Yeah.
no two people's stories are identical, but there is someone out there in the world who gets what you're going through at, at some point. It may
Yeah.
not be the identical details, but the situation is the same. And they've either come through it or they're struggling through it. They may be at a
Yep.
different point than you are, and you can influence their journey. You never know, but it usually has a positive, beneficial outcome for one, if not both of you.
So true. Yeah. I totally agree. And again, it's one of the cool things I see men start to register is, oh, this actually becomes a type of leadership where I
Mm,
can serve and support other men. And if there's one thing that gets, the masculine going is we love taking care of other people, right? This
mhm.
feeling of, oh, I can support, I can help, I have a purpose. And turns out me learning to work with my emotions, my pain, creating connection, it can serve others in my community, other men, young boys. And it really starts to change the game for guys. I've seen long term in groups where it gives them this real sense of purpose that, okay, yeah, I'm not doing this just for me, I'm doing it for other people. And that really um, just makes things a lot more meaningful for men and helps, I think, for a lot of guys really tackle some of the crisis of purpose and meaning where they just don't know what to do in life. Where am I supposed to help? How can I help? I want to help, but I don't know how to help. Getting into community like this actually brings forward some very visceral and personal ways you can start to help men
Right.
in your life. And again, what I've seen groups do more than anything else is give men a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. And when a man has a sense of belonging and purpose,
Yeah.
the world's his oyster.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Before we have to wrap up, I want to talk about briefly your podcast. Um, the Evolutionary Men, that's your podcast, correct?
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit, briefly about the conversations that you have on that podcast, and do you
sure.
have
Yeah.
if you have guests come on and things like that.
Yeah, I would say my show's probably 70 to 80% solo episodes. And then I do have some guests on. A lot of some of my partners that I run programs with will often do stuff on. But it's really just all about what does it take to be a healthy, thriving man in this day and age that doesn't succumb to the old belief of you either have to be kind of honestly a macho dick or a pushover, soft, wimpy, kind of nice guy. In that actually what we're talking about here is the third way, where it's totally possible for us as men to have complete connection to our power, our desire, our capacity to set healthy boundaries and say no, and still be very attuned, very sensitive, learn how to feel and express, and that we can become leaders in so many of the relationships in our lives. So, my podcast is really about how we as men can learn to lead in life and in love, and the many things we need to be aware of in terms of our mental, physical, and emotional health. And in particular, like I've been talking about, all the many reasons men's work and men's groups in particular are so important, where we just go through countless examples of the ways um, community can change your life, getting connected to your emotions can change your life, learning to regulate your nervous system can change your life, learning to get connected to a sense of purpose. Like it's all there. It's just everything I've kind of learned in my own personal journey of transformation and becoming a father and husband. And now in the hundreds of men I've coached, I've just seen, okay, whatever you think about it, here's what moves the needle on men's lives. The quality of their lives drastically improve when they do these things. So my podcast is, at this point, over 100 episodes of just talking about those things. So if you're a man and you're like, okay, I'm a little skeptical or whatever, but you just tune in, find some episodes that, sound good to you and see what happens when you start listening.
Yeah, yeah. I sent the podcast to my husband, so I'll let you know how that goes, what he thinks.
Nice.
There's a few podcasts that he listens to, so
Yeah.
I think he'll definitely add this to his list, but I'll let you know separately, his feedback
Sure.
about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
But
men love podcasts. That's
yes,
one thing I've learned. Men love listening to podcasts. I think
yeah,
it's a nice stopgap for a lot of men. They're like, well, I
yeah,
don't want to go to therapy right away. But if you're like, hey, listen to this podcast, they start to get it. And it's a
absolutely.
way in. It's a great gateway for so many guys.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say before we wrap up?
No, thank you so much for having me and helping get the message out. And yeah, if you are a man listening and you want to learn more, you can check out the podcast. You can visit my site at evolutionary.men. All the different kinds of men's groups and programs and things I lead are on there. And you don't even have to work with me. So my main passion is getting men connected in groups. So if you're like, I don't know where to start, I want to find something in my town or city, just reach out with the contact form on my site. And I'm very plugged in to, men's group world at this point. And I can at least point you in the right direction. So it doesn't even have to be me you work with, but
Yeah,
don't wait. A lot of guys wait till there's a crisis to
yeah,
start to get support. And the truth is, the crisis will be a lot easier if you already have the support. You
yeah,
already have
yeah,
support. And it's like, okay, yeah, my parent died or I lost my job. And it's not quite as devastating because we have something to catch us, which is
yeah,
community and other men. So, you can start now.
yeah. I love that. That's perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for spending this time with us on Just the Who of Us. We hope today's conversation offered reflection, comfort, or a moment of clarity. If this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it with someone who may need it. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember, you're not alone in the journey.